working with a team that was doing an investigation. And I left Myrtle's, actually. And I was back at the hotel, and my wife said, I feel weird. I thought I heard something. And we were miles away from Myrtle's mansion, by the way, at this point. So I decided to turn on my recorder, and I said, hey, is anybody here? Not thinking I was going to get anything, obviously. You're in a hotel. You can hear 1,000 different things. And this still could be explained logically. Maybe somebody was in the other room. And then I played it back because I said, who is here? And I heard Marie LeBeau. Okay, well, with the investigating team, maybe that's somebody in another room. So I continued to hit the recording again, and I said, okay, well, I heard a name, so can you tell me where you are and who you're with? And then I played it back, and it says Marie LeBeau is in the hotel with Chris. Now, I can't explain that, just so you know. But it was a unique experience. Now, it could still be logically explainable. There could be somebody in the other hotel that knew what I was doing in the first place, or the other room that knew what I was doing in the first place, could have been right by the wall and could have answered that question for me, and I didn't hear it.
That's a possibility, and, you'll never know. I mean, I had situations where I managed a business in Tacoma, Washington. The building went back to 1870s. It was originally, the basement was a bar. It was right off where the port, where the sailors would come in, from all the ships would come in. And it was a hotel upstairs. It was a brothel. And, I had mass amount of employees over a 15-year period come and tell me that they wouldn't go in the basement anymore because they heard noises. They heard, people talking. Things would move. And I started thinking these people are crazy, camera salesmen. Maybe they's out there a little bit. But some of these people one of them was an ex-Navy SEAL, one was a Ranger, actually was still in the military, moonlighting on the weekends. It never happened to me, but one day I went down in that basement, and two things happened over maybe a 2-week period. The first time I walked down there, I smelled lilac, and it got really ice cold. And I backed up. I didn't smell the lilac anymore, and it wasn't cold. So I just passed that off as my imagination. And then, like about 2 weeks later, I was down in the basement. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder where it hurt, and I actually was going to go around and probably punch the guy out. There was nobody there. Nobody. And I'm going, okay, this is getting strange. Well, you have an electronic background. Okay, I used to clean sensors, in the cameras, the CMOS sensors, removing the dust. So I had to do that after the business closed, where there wasn't no movement around because we didn't have the best clean room. So sometimes I'd be down there, because I would have a lot of cameras to do, especially at the beginning with those suckers. I'd be down there sometimes 11 or 12 o'clock at night. I would double lock the doors so nobody could be in there. Not even the owner of the business could come in because it was double locked on the inside. I would hear footsteps going upstairs. Now, the first time I heard it was like only one footstep going up. I kind of thought, maybe somehow the owner got in. I checked. No, nobody there. And then over a couple weeks, it started progressing where I heard multiple footsteps going up the stairs. And then I started hearing muffled talking going up the stairs. And that's when I said to the owner, I said, you know what? We got a problem here. I'm the only one you have here. And I was actually the general manager. I said, I'm the only one here qualified in this organization, the 3 stores that clean these sensors. I'm not going to be here anymore after the store closes. You got to figure this out.
I've heard that a lot we have a local place up here that just contacted me that there's a lady in photography that she's renting a studio and they have basement issues, and she was wondering if I could get a team in. I told her I'd talk to a few people and have them come in there. But it reminded me, we were at the H0st Reformatory filming with somebody, and we were down in an area of a basement that they don't let anybody in. It's right above the lower cell block on the east wing, and there was a guard that came in at right around 1 a.m. He would come in and he would hit the cages again, and he'd remind everybody it's lights out. So he would say a specific term that was basically dark. I think it was dark out or something like that. Dark out, silence. And we were running our recorders. Me and my tech guy, Joe Myers, were running our recorders, and we could have swore we heard the clinging on the bars upstairs, and we could have swore we heard somebody say dark out. Well, I played the EVP back, and it sounds like somebody saying that. It sounds like there's a guard that's shouting down the hallway, dark out. So I'm going to test that, actually. We're going back August 26th, and I'm going to put everybody in the West Wing, and I'm going to sit down in that basement by myself running a recorder and see if we can catch that at 1 a.m. again, just out of curiosity to see if that's what we got.
Well, you're brave. You're brave.
Well, I'll jump. I'm different than everybody else because I am in it for the logistics, the science, and the explanation. So when other people run back and go, "Oh my God, I've got something that's bad. I've got something that's evil," so I run straight into it, sit down, and say, "Okay, show me what you got."
Well, you know what I did in that case? I researched, any of the records they had with the local newspaper in Tacoma. And what they pulled up, I guess there was a couple prostitutes that were, one was, I guess, cut up and put in a trunk, and the murder got caught. But it was in one of the rooms upstairs, or where the rooms used to be upstairs. And then there was a couple people who were killed in the basement in the bar. And then I started thinking, wow. So then I went maybe a month ago back to, the business is no longer there because camera shops are not really there anymore. As you know, the things have changed to the internet. So, little stores like that don't exist much anymore. But there's a big title company there now that bought the building. They refurbished it, did all this stuff. And I went in there. And, I said, hey, I used to work in here for like almost 14, 15 years. Anything ever strange? And the receptionist looked at me and goes, what do you mean by strange? I said, anything strange. And she goes, oh, my God, yeah, this place is haunted. And then, they started saying the same type of things I used to hear from, like, during that course of all those employees. I mean, I heard it from almost every employee for over 13, 14 years coming up and telling me, strange things. And then here I going into a place I haven't been into since 2003, and the receptionist is telling me the stuff that that I was being told by my ex-employees or employees, or what I heard myself. So that makes me wonder if things like that are real, and I think they really are. But I mean, again, like I always tell people, you don't find it if you go looking for it. It's all accidental. Well,
I think it's a combination of things. I think that there is the unknown factor. There are things that we can't explain. And I also think from dealing with the historian side of things and talking to a lot of professors and a lot of people that research urban myth and so forth, we are bred now, ever since we can remember, and you guys will actually agree with this, when you grew up, there was always a haunted story. Though it may not have hit the public the way it does now, we are bred to where we have heard about these things from birth. So a lot of times we actually expect these things to happen. So you really have to separate yourself, and I've worked really hard to do this, and it's tough to do sometimes. You really have to separate yourself to try to figure out that truth. Because, like you said, you came back 30 years later. I wonder how many people, if you actually sat down and did the research, how many people heard of that story before they came to work there or after they came to work there, and then psychologically it passes on from one person to another person to another person. Now the place remains haunted because everybody believed it was haunted in the first place from an original story where somebody heard or saw something, if that makes sense. Because I've noticed that a lot when I'm going out to these locations, especially when you get to the commercial locations. Commercial locations, residential and commercial are a little bit different. But when you get to commercial locations, you get to these big locations, I won't mention any names, but you'll find that the same histories are there, and you'll find that people have individual experiences that vary a little bit in every situation. And if you log those experiences, you start to wonder, are we really getting something at these commercial locations most of the time, or are we getting what people want to see because they're at the commercial locations expecting a haunting?
They want it. They want it. That's the problem.
Yeah, it becomes a barrier you have to separate yourself from a lot of times. And when I went to a lot of these commercial locations, I'll be honest with you, some of them I've been to 7, 8, 9, and 10 times, and some of them I've gotten absolutely no activity in at all. I've sat in dark rooms. I've sat in the little mortuary bins, where they put the dead bodies, and sat there for an hour and a half and laid down in it. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So when you separate yourself from it, you start realizing there's a lot more here. There's a lot of things that can be explained, and there's a lot of things you run across somewhere along the line that no matter how much you try to explain it, you just can't.
Oh, yeah. That is so true. Now, how about you, Michael?
Yeah, Gary, I wanted to not let any more time go by. Since Chris is the exact person that we need to ask this question to. He lives in Ohio. He's into the scientific investigations of cryptids and those kinds of things. What are your impressions of this famous Ohio howl that Bigfooters out there are typically, using as evidence of Bigfooting exists right in your neck of the woods?
Well, you kind of have to look into Bigfoot when you're in Ohio because there's so many claims that come along with it. And I personally have had some sort of experience that ended up being a Bigfoot experience in a local paper here in Morrow County. It didn't have me in it, but the sheriff did interviews and so forth. Now, whether it was Bigfoot or not, I don't know. I don't think the howl's relevant. I don't think the tapping on trees is relevant. I really don't. And whether I believe in Bigfoot or not, one has to ask if for so many years we still haven't seen this, does it really exist? Well, it could be very elusive, but, we're very populated here in the United States. It's not like there's very many rural areas that things can hide anymore, especially with technology. So why are we not picking something up? So I'm still on the air with a lot of Bigfoot things, though I will tell you my experience was very unusual. It was in the middle of the day. I was about 15 or 16 at the time, and something walked up to the side of our house and just hit it. And it physically moved the bricks. It hit it so hard on a foundation. So
wow.
When it hit it, my mom was stunned, and she immediately called the sheriff, which brought the game warden out, and the sheriff came out eventually. But she did it for another reason. She opened the door thinking that something hit the house. And then she heard this really loud, unusual growl, which I still remember and I can't explain. It was just the strangest sound in the world. And at that point, my dad used to chop wood because we had a wood burner. It's a small country town, so, when the electric goes out, you got to be able to heat yourself. And these logs run somewhere around 15 to 25 pounds apiece. Now, something was grabbing those logs and lunging them so far that a human being couldn't do it. I mean, it wasn't like you were just tossing it as a human being, a 25-pound weight. No, this thing was going flying clear out into the field, and there were log after log after log while this growl was going on. So she was freaking out at this point, didn't know whether, okay, maybe we got a bear, maybe we got something crazy going on out there. So she called the game warden, and the game warden conferenced in the sheriff, and the sheriff said, okay, we're going to be out here in a little while. We'll take a look at it. The activity died down, and then they decided to go out and look at it. Well, they followed a trail. The trail was separated as if it looked like something was walking, not beat down. So you had weeds that were beat up to a certain point and weeds that were beat down, like there was a path where a human being would walk in a bunch of weeds. There were trees that were about the size of your arm that were broken down during this process, small trees that were broken over. And I remember while we're sitting out there, as they come back up, the game warden states, I have no way to explain this. I don't see bear tracks. I don't know what's going on. It's a dry day. I have no tracks or feet. We're going to trail this and see if we can find something, but I don't think we are. I think the danger's out of the way. And I remember the sheriff laughing and going, well, that's another Bigfoot incident. And they put it in the local paper up here and so forth. But I'll never forget that. That got me into thinking about Bigfoot. So I looked around, and there's a lot of sightings out here. It's died down in the past 20 years, but it's still out here. But when you ask about that Bigfoot howls and the tapping on the trees and so forth. You know, I've been in a lot of wooded areas out here in Ohio, and I've heard some very strange things in wooded areas out here in Ohio. But I got to honestly tell you, I've never heard a weird howl like that, and I've never heard a tap on a tree.
Now, I'm going to jump in here. I don't know if you listened, Chris, any of my previous